All right. You want the good news or the bad news or just some news?
Some news.
Okay. Some news is, I'm giving you, well, I guess this might partly the good news. I don't know which. This class is supposed to also go on next week. I cannot be here next week.
Chuck will do it.
So Chuck's, and so I need to talk with Linda because she's in charge. We may have like a panel discussion or do something different next week, but I have to be at an officer's viewing with the family. As you know, we had an incredible tragedy Monday, and as chaplain, I'm now kind of in charge of all that. Been counseling with a lot of deputies this last week, and our central dispatch folks. I couldn't imagine being one of the central dispatch folks that has to hear the first news of that and have to deploy that news and not be able to go to the scene and see or know what's going on in the midst of that. And so there's a lot of PTSD and around these kind of situations. And so pray for them, pray for me. God gives me wisdom as I speak to them. And also trying to help a mom wrap her brain around. She's now a single mother of 4. They have 2 kids that were theirs. But 3 years prior to this, Caleb's sister passed away. And when she passed away, she had 2 kids. And so they've been parenting those 2 kids for the most part too. So there are 4 kids really involved in this. They didn't have legal custody. His parents have legal custody of those other 2 kids, but they parent them. And it's more than just an aunt-uncle kind of relationship. It's more almost a mom-dad kind of relationship for them. And there was nothing good Monday other than the bad guy got caught. That was the only good thing that happened Monday. And so now we're trying to watch some good come out of a very horrible situation. The good news was on Tuesday, as we transported the body from the ME's office to Cynthiana, 64 was lined with people. But that one was really, really cool for me because we're coming eastbound on 64, and obviously all the traffic in front of us is stopped. They've shut off all the exits. No one can get on, no one can get behind. Everybody has to stay way behind us. But on the westbound lanes, they were free to do whatever. They were free to travel, and they voluntarily all stopped, almost all of them, and got out of their vehicles. And some were on a knee, many were saluting, many were having their hand on their heart. That was really, really cool. And then we get off and come into Georgetown, and the place was just lined, just packed with people. The family was just incredibly overwhelmed by that kind of goodness. And he's from Harrison County. And we, in our own thinking, thought, okay, we get outside of Scott County, it's going to peter out a little bit, be a little bit less crowd. As soon as we hit the Harrison County line, it made Scott County look like no one showed up. I mean, it was unbelievable how much outpouring of support and love for this family and for our sheriff's department and for law enforcement in general. And that procession was about 1.5 miles long. It took us 3 hours to go from Frankfort to Cynthiana. And that won't be half of what will be there for the funeral. We've heard from law enforcement offices in Canada, in Great Britain, in Australia, that are sending people. His dad retired as a 20-year officer from Arizona State Police, and they are sending a large contingent from Arizona here. And it's overwhelming. They said that just the law enforcement side of the procession will probably be 3 to 5 miles long. It'll be unbelievable. And we're having the funeral here. Visitation funeral will be at Scott County High School, only because Harrison County High School can't handle it. They don't have the parking. They really did everything we could to try and have it in Harrison County, but there's just no way. And so that procession is going to be just crazy. And so I'm having to organize this funeral. Thankfully, there's a great agency that helps us called Supporting Heroes, and it's a nonprofit agency of first responders that. You okay? Then they're done that. And this is what they do. They do first responder family funerals. And so they're helping us greatly. They have one person that their entire job is you organize how to park the cars at wherever the funeral's at. And another person, their job is to organize the cemetery and how to get people where they need to be. And I mean, it's unbelievable. So it's really helped out a lot. But there are a lot of logistics. I had some weird instances happen. I've had a phone call from the FBI. And some of you may know this. This is not, hasn't been public knowledge. I've been chaplain with our sheriff's office for the last 13 and a half years, ever since Tony has been in office. I went to a training at the FBI Center that was just for chaplains, law enforcement chaplains, last fall, and they asked me to come on as a FBI chaplain. And so I knew they had my number a little bit, but this guy did not have my number. He said, I have your number now because I can find anybody's number I want to find. And so they told me that there will be a strong FBI presence and Secret Service presence at this funeral, because there are going to be so many law enforcement folks there. There only takes one idiot to do a really bad thing, as we saw Monday, and there'd be even worse there. And there'll be some dignitaries there. Rand Paul has called and said he will be there. Our governor has made both personal phone calls to Rachel Conley, the spouse, and just the outpouring has just been amazing. But I would covet your prayers if you would. It's going to be a big week yet. Everything starts next week. We have a prayer vigil tomorrow night, candlelight vigil, I should say. It's not going to be necessarily a church function. It's for our community. It'll be downtown on the square, which I think is a crazy place to have it, but that's what they decided. And I said, okay, we'll make it happen. And so we've got to make that happen tomorrow at 8. But that'll be a really good service and an outpouring for the family and for the law enforcement and for everybody. So just pray for us as we're going through all this. It was the darkest day in Scott County history on Monday.
He was also a veteran, wasn't he?
He was an 8-year Army veteran. He was a member of the Army Reserve. I didn't know this till today. When I was in a combat engineering unit, is what we were attached to. I was a civil engineering unit. I was a 20-ton crane operator. He was in a civil engineering unit in the Army Reserve, and he was also a large equipment operator.
Wow.
So we had a lot of parallels I didn't know. And I've rode with him, been with him quite a few times. And if there is a quintessential perfect kind of person you want to have as a deputy in this county, he's it. He was the hardest working guy. I can tell you some details and stuff of the situation. He wasn't even supposed to have been working that day. He decided we needed extra coverage, and so he was working. And as I told the family on Monday, we saw that one evil person can bring lots of darkness into the world. But on Tuesday, we saw how the vast majority of people in the world are much better and good, and there is more good than evil in the world. And that's what we saw Monday and Tuesday. That was the contrast. And so it's been a week. It feels like it's been a month in the last couple of days, but it's been a week, and it's going to be a big week to come yet. So with that being said, we're going to have to send out some texts or whatever to figure out what we're doing next Wednesday, because I need to be at the viewing and I need to be with this family. And so we may or may not have class next week. You may get a vacation. Maybe school's out already, so because class is in Friday. You get some freedom come Friday, come Saturday.
Y'all might hear me squalling.
No doubt. I don't blame you. You might hear Paul squalling then. You never know. You never know. But tonight I want to talk about a topic that is it's probably one of the toughest topics in marriage to talk about. Mainly because most marriages never talk about it. Everybody needs to. Nobody wants to. Very few ever do. Okay? Any idea what I'm talking about tonight?
What's for dinner?
Well, there is that. There is the what's for dinner talk that I don't care. We saw that video not too long ago. I don't care, whatever you want. No, not that though. It goes forever, right? That's what's tough. And it's not the toothpaste talk where we solved that. We told you we solved that. She has her toothpaste. I have my toothpaste. I don't care what she does with her toothpaste. Just don't touch my toothpaste. That kind of thing. So, any idea?
Sex.
Oh no, that's the fun topic. That's actually what we're going to talk about next week.
Oh, okay.
So we may delay 1 week, okay? So that's okay.
Money.
That's the worst.
Money is the number one cause of divorce is money. But it has nothing to do with money. It is money, but it has nothing to do with money. It's all because there's a lack of communication about money. And one person typically knows everything, one person typically knows nothing. And there's not a lot of communication, and it causes a huge amount of stress. And so tonight I wanted to talk a little bit about money in marriage and how we can, in the midst of our situations, our own individual, personal, separate, different situations, how can we have harmony in marriage with the most difficult topic to talk about in marriage, money. See if this is you. What? Hang on. Turned itself off, didn't it?
Goodness, it is not me.
I'm going to end just for a second. There we go. This. For some reason, every time that I stop my computer, everything changes. Anybody else have that? Am I the only one?
Because you got that Ohio State.
Oh, I knew somebody was going to bring that up. What is
Way
that
to go,
about?
Pam.
What is that about?
You would not believe the sirens that we heard by the house in Frankfurt
Oh, yeah.
Tuesday.
That's that procession. Everyone was running lights and sirens the entire way.
I mean,
There's no doubt.
they were just sirens, sirens, and sirens.
Did you see they interviewed Michael?
They interviewed Molly? I did not know that. They told me tonight. I didn't know I was on TV yesterday.
They, afterwards talked to her about the kids and everything, they were all down there studying.
Oh, that's cool.
It was on LAX 18.
That's awesome. I had a conversation with LAX 18, but it was them coming and just saying thank you for all that you guys do, which I thought was really cool. They didn't have to do that. All right, I'm gonna try this again. No guarantees, but I want to see if this is you in your conversation on marriage. Okay, it got worse. It's worse.
And that's us.
Yeah, this is probably how the conversation happens, right? It doesn't.
Prayer group's getting rowdy over there.
Why is my sound not working at all? Okay. See, I get flustered and change things that I shouldn't change, maybe.
Just us.
Will you forgive me?
Just us, of course.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know what's going on there. Somebody getting at it. It's Sergio probably.
He's a rat.
He's a crazy guy. All right, let's see if we actually have some volume now.
Sweet. And just look at all the big scopes of equipment. Whoa, one gel. Two nurses. Two nurses, one baby. We're actually okay if you want to clock out.
Hello, Maria. I'm Dr. Doherty, the anesthesiologist.
Do you charge by the hour, or how does that work? Keep on bringing, sweetie. Keep on bringing. We'll have to pay all that money for those classes. Is there something that I can do?
The epidural?
Yeah. Do you need an epidural? I've got some big toast for you.
She's gonna get it.
Hello, Tony. Hello, Maria. Just fine. You're about 5 centimeters down. Just throwing money away. I'm like, just throwing money. I've actually got one. Do you guys not like parking?
She's gonna want everything to
As humorous as it is, that's really a lot of truth in that. Usually one person is the, oh my, we're throwing away money. Do we really need that? Do you need that? Do you need an epidural? I mean, seriously, come on. Do you need 2 nurses for one baby? No. Send one home, right? And the other person is there going, no. You send one home, you better send yourself home because you're going to die. So, but when it came to learning how to do a budget, because if we've gotten this far in life, I'm assuming, and I hope it's a safe assumption. I know what they say, what happens when you assume. But I think it's a safe assumption to say, at some point in life, we have figured out how to budget our money, at least to some extent. At least somewhat. At least enough to hide it well enough that nobody knows that we don't know how to budget, if we don't know how to budget. But who taught you how to budget? I've seen a lot of people shake their head. Okay,
Dave Ramsey,
okay, and when was that?
after I was old.
But you're not old yet.
Oh, but I am.
My college teacher.
Oh, okay, in college. That's good. And you had a class, a finance class, or
Yes, it was a finance and economics.
that's good. That's good. That's a rarity. I had an economics class when I was my freshman year. I had economics 1, economics 2. We talked about all these principles of economics and never talked once about budgeting. I'm like, that might make sense. The closest they got was supply and demand. Okay, as long as we have a supply of money, there was always a demand for it. That's what I found. That's typical budgeting, right?
There's a demand for it versus supply.
Yeah, and sometimes the demand is higher than the supply. That's usually what happens. What's funny is, okay, it's already awkward and hard enough for parents to have a sex talk with their kids, but I think that talk might be easier than the money talk with their kids, or at least it happens more often. And I think that's maybe because they just didn't want grandbabies yet, but they'd really like us to be able to succeed financially. I was fortunate. Both of my parents only had 8th grade educations, both for extenuating circumstances. My mother, her parents had passed away when she was really young, and so she was somewhat adopted by her aunt and uncle and lived with them and had to help run their little store. And when she got to 8th grade, they said, you've learned enough, you're working full-time in the store. My dad had a tractor accident when he was 12, and he was in the hospital for a year in traction. They put a steel ball in for a hip, it crushed his hip. It was a really bad accident. There's actually a couple articles that I've seen where they didn't think he was going to live. They wrote a news article about him. And so when he got to 8th grade, he's like, I'm 2 years older than everybody in class, I'm out. And they just quit. They work on the farm. In those days, you could just quit and go work on the farm. But if there's one thing my parents taught me, I can't remember if they really had the sex talk with me. I don't think so. It wouldn't have worked anyhow. But I do remember, nobody chuckled there, thank you. Not at that time in my life. But I do remember they sat down with me and they said, if there's one thing you need to know in life, and my dad at this time had, for a guy who had very little education, was probably one of the smartest guys in life I've ever known. Before he married my mom, he owned his own full-service gas station and ran it himself. He was a head mechanic at a farm implement company, and he was there for about 3-4 years, and a corporate farm, Big Bear Food Stores, asked him to come be a manager for their farm. And so he managed a 2,800 acre farm and all the finances for it. So for a guy who had very little education, he was incredibly smart. And at one point he decided, we're going to sit down and I'm going to show you how to do a budget. I started earning money as a kid mowing lawns. He wanted me to, you had to work on the farm for food, okay? But if you wanted to do anything extra, you had to have your own job to make extra money, because that was expected. This is extra. And so I started, he let me use his lawnmower. He provided all the gas. He said, you go mow. And as I started making a good bit of money, he's like, now we got to figure out what to do with all this money. I'm like, I know what to do with all this money. It's party time. You know, we're going to have fun now. And he's like, nope, 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 nope. And so he sat me down and he started talking me through a budget. He goes, if you don't learn to budget your finances, if you don't learn to budget your money, and if you don't know where your money's going, you'll look back and go, where did it go? You won't know where it went. And you'll end up eventually in debt more than what you can pay off. And so they set me down and we had the money talk, as I call it. And Dad said, look, you've got to learn what your expenses are in order to understand what your income needs to be. If your income is a certain level, but you want to live at a different level, you can't let your expenses get over your income, or you'll never live at a higher level. You've got to make sure that your expenses are always under your income. Now, they weren't Christian. In this talk, there was no idea of giving money to a church or an organization or whatever. It was just, here's what your income is, here's what your expenses are. And whatever your income is, your expenses has to be less. And as one of your expenses that you never have down, because he asked me, what are my expenses? And I'm like, gas for the lawnmower? And you provide it, so I really don't have anything? He goes, okay, let's pretend. He goes, let's pretend you rent an apartment or a house. And so you've got rent and you've got lights, so you need electric. You need hot water, so you've got water bills. You want to get rid of the stuff out of your house, so you have a sewer bill. You have these bills. You want to eat, so you have food. You've got all these things. So how do you break that down? How do you make this into a way to manage? And so I began just kind of writing all these things down. And he said the one thing you didn't write down was savings, because what are you gonna do when your car breaks down? What are you gonna do? At that time it was a bike, so a moped. What are you gonna do when that thing breaks down? I'm like, get another. How? Oh, yeah, that's right. And so he started telling me, okay, if you're gonna do this right, you got to make sure to apportion money in the right places, and to make sure that you never overportion it to the wrong places. You'd be amazed. This is something I do about every 2-3 months. I begin to look at where our money went. Go back through my Visa statement, go back through credit card statements or whatever, and go, where did we spend what? I love that now you can kind of categorize them within the online stuff. And so I can categorize. What do you think is one of the highest, outside of your mortgage, what do you think is the highest expenditure you have on most months? Eating out. Eating out. And it's the food kind of falls into that, but I would say eating out more than just groceries.
Yeah.
You said that way too loud.
And the crazy thing is, it's easier to eat out, or we think it is. We've kind of learned to buy the lie that, because it's convenient. Convenience kills your budget more than anything. When you look at what we pay for, I love to go to Texas Roadhouse. I love a good steak. I love a couple veggies with it, onion blossom. You can't beat that, right? And so you start looking at that and you go, how much did that cost them compared to how much it costs me? And you think, okay, there's some of this I can do at home, some of that I can't. I can't make that cactus blossom like that. I'll try, but I can't. There's some of that you just can't do. But we've got to learn where our biggest expenditures are. Some of our big expenditures, mortgage is probably our highest if you still have a mortgage. Some people pay that off as fast as possible. That's a winner's game right there, by the way. The financiers tell you that if you pay half a payment every other week, you'll pay off your loan at least 10 years faster. In our mind, that doesn't make sense, except that means you're paying a couple extra payments every year. And so that's all principal, knocks off the interest, and especially at the beginning of your loan, that's where that interest eats you up the most. Lois and I operate on somewhat of a principal, almost completely, where we pay at least 3/4 of a payment every other week. God's blessed us. We tighten our belt in other areas, 3/4 of a payment every other week. And then if we get, okay, this is really weird, but when I do a funeral, that's called a bonus. Okay, make a little extra money. Some of that goes into vacation, some of that goes into extra mortgage payment. I usually split about 50-50. When she gets a bonus at work, 50-50, half into vacation, half into mortgage. When we get a tax return, if we do the same thing. Half goes into savings, half goes into mortgage. And it kills a mortgage in a heartbeat. And that's all money that you didn't count on in your budget. So then it's killing the mortgage payment, the highest payment that you probably make in life, faster than any other payment. Dave Ramsey has a great principle that it's called snowballing your debt. Whatever your debt is, you take the smallest one, you pay it off first, and then you take that payment, you snowball into the next one, the next one, the next one, and you get rid of all your payments as fast as possible. Mainly with people with credit card debt. But next highest one is either if you have 2 car payments, that's usually a pretty high one, or insurance and mortgage, or taxes, property taxes, usually a pretty high one. Then eating out is, if outside of those, eating out is the highest expense that I think we typically have. And then there's this other category that we can't really ever, it's like nailing Jello to a wall. We typically call it miscellaneous. That means anything that's not in the budget that we just decide we want. When we stop someplace and say, oh, that looks nice, I think I'll get that. We buy it. Oh, that was just miscellaneous spending. And so sometimes we have to gauge how much, how little, and where our miscellaneous is and what that means. And so my dad taught me how to budget, and that's kind of how we've kind of learned to run. And I had to relearn once I became Christian. My dad's relearn now that he's Christian, and you know, we've talked about this a little bit about how we do it. One way that I think that you can easily budget within your home, that there's good communication and there's good equity, equal amount of give and take within the budget, is a simple plan. God's kind of give us the beginning of that plan. He says that we should give him 10% off the top. Now, what's funny is when we do budgets, typically in our home, where does the tithe and offering really fall in our budgeting? It's the bottom. It's what we think of last. It's if we have anything extra, we'll give it to God. I call that tipping the waiter. That means that, you know, hey, you know, God, you did a good job. I've got a little extra. I'll give you part of it, kind of thing. Personally, I think that should be the number one thing. If you put that first, God's already said he's going to do what? He's going to bless you. In fact, Scripture tells us he's going to bless us so much, he equals it to when somebody is pouring something into a box, and it goes into that box, and it fills that box, and it pours over into your lap. There's so much. He says he's going to open up the floodgates of heaven and bless you. I mean, anybody here, anybody else want to see the floodgates of heaven open up on your life and your home, and that de-stresses everything, right? And what's funny is we tend to think, oh, if I just won the lottery, I'd de-stress. If I just won the $100,000, I'd be happy. Right? And I find it interesting that we're seeing more and more people in the media where they're posting, oh, won $75,000, won $50,000. It's the media trying to get us to play more of the lottery, which, by the way, you can be struck by lightning 3 times. Your odds are better than winning the lottery once. We've been struck by lightning once, so I'm waiting for the other 2 before I play. Just kidding. So, if you give God the first 10%, where should the other 90% go? What do you do with the other 90%? Any idea? What do you think?
15% into savings for retirement.
Okay, I agree. At least 10, if best 15, put into savings in one area or another. Typically 10% into what I would call your retirement fund, whatever that looks like, investments, whatever. And that other 5, I would put into savings for an emergency fund. So that when the car does break down, because cars are made to break down, right? I've yet to drive one forever. It felt like forever until it died, and then I was out forever. And the hot water heater will go out when you're in the shower. You know, I mean, these things will happen, and if we don't plan for them to happen, we won't be able to prepare to pay for it when it happens. Something else has got to be squished. And so then if we were to take 10% to God, 10 to 15%, we'll say 15%, so how much do we have left? 75%. And then if we take that 75% and we say, this is how we're going to live the rest of our life. This is what we're going to use. So then you begin subtracting out what your mortgage is, what your interest, the definite bills. Okay? And then once you get done, you go, okay, this is how much we have for eating out. Would that be a little bit easier to gauge for you? So then what do you do when, can I pick on you too?
Sure.
He's going golfing. Because I get a text from him on a regular basis. God bless your heart. You don't know what that does for me. By the way, it won't be till next Friday, but baby, I'm hitting them. I'm telling you, I'm gonna hit them as far and hard as I can. But where is his money? You know, that's $25, $20. You know, oh well, we're seniors now, right? You know, it's around 20 each, right? Where does that come from? And do you then get to go spend $20 anywhere and anywhere? Or how does he come up with that money? You know, how do we talk about that in the relationship? Because here's what I think. Now, there's different philosophies in this budgeting thing. Some of them just went through what we just did. 10%, 10 to 15%, and then the other 75% is what you live on. I propose this, and this is kind of how Lois and I do. We're real squishy with it. We do the 10% first. Sometimes that 10% grows to 15%, because I figure the more I can give to God, the more God's going to bless me, and it's worked every time. He's never failed me yet. Never, never, never. And then we always put about 15% into savings. So let's say now that's 30%, okay? Let's say we're going 15, right? So now we're at 70% is what we got left. We decide within our budget, okay, I get 5%, she gets 5%. That's my mad money. Whatever she wants, if she wants to go get something, she go gets it. Never have to ask a question. It's there, it's hers, it's what she does. If I want to go golf, I've got the money to do that. It's there, it's whatever I want to do. If I want to put more, toys on my Jeep, it comes out of my Toys and Jeep fund that I budget out of my 5%. But now, you may change that percentage, but then that gives you freedom to be able to go, here's a way that I can go and, without having to worry my spouse, where'd you get the money for that kind of thing, and I can have my fun, and they can have their fun, and it's okay, and all's good. And so then you take that 10%, now we're at 60%. We had a good bad thing happen about a month ago. Our son was driving our car, my Lois's car in Lexington, and it wasn't his fault. Purely not his fault. We had 5 payments left on the car. 5. That's the light at the end of the tunnel, right? That's the freedom. We're gonna ride that car for a little while, and then now I'll tell you what we usually do when that happens. But anyhow, he got hit, totaled the car. And so now we're like, oh, we bought that car almost 4 years ago. We've been paying a little bit extra on, so we're gonna pay a 5-year loan off in 4 years. And so we're at the point of like, freedom. And so now we're like, you can't buy that same car for that same money. So what do? You go back and you look at your budget and go, where does this fit? And what can we do? We let our budget determine what our budget for a car is, and not what our brain wants or our ego wants or what my reputation wants for a car. And allow that to then drive what I'm going to drive in the future. Blessing of all blessings, we get the insurance payment out for the car, and we're able to buy I'm supposed to go sign the papers on it tomorrow. She's getting a Subaru Forester.
Wow.
She's a happy camper.
Silver?
No, it's going to be the same color as my Jeep. That's the only bad part. We're going to have twin vehicles. We were really hoping to not have 2 gray vehicles in the family, but that's okay. She said silver because, like, the majority of all of our cars in life have been silver, and Lois hates silver cars. We were determined that that's what we're going to end up with. But she's okay with gray. I told her we could put a nice red stripe down it. I think it'd be perfect. I have no problem with that. I was like, Sandra, you'd love a car like, no, you wouldn't, would you? She's a wish you can win fan. And so we were able to take the insurance money, couple it with what we figured we can budget, and able to buy a car that is a not new car but new to us car that only has like 20,000 miles on it. Can't beat that, right? I mean that's and so then we stay at the same amount of payments that we were before, or even a little bit less, and now we're still within our budget and have to make a big budget adjustment, because typically big purchases mean big adjustments, and this way we didn't have to worry about that at all. Where was I going with that?
Just the light at the end of the tunnel got a little.
Yes, a little further away, a smaller dot in the future, but we're going to get there. Now, here's what we would done. Okay, that reminds me where I was going. Here's what my dad taught me to do, because he said you're almost always going to have at least 1 car payment, and we have found that we almost always have at least 1.5 to 2 car payments. That's the way just life has been for us, unfortunately. We try to get it to only 1. We get 5 months away, and that's what happens. But here's what we do when we get to only 1, so that we don't have to worry about the second one later. When I had my pickup truck, before I bought my Jeep, I had my pickup truck for 7 years. And in that 7 years, it only took me 2 years to pay it off. So I had 5 years. We took the payment that we would normally pay for that truck and put it into savings in a special spot in savings that's unusable. So then I had 5 years of truck payment money to put down on a Jeep, which then lowers the process of that Jeep to where it's really manageable and not a stressor, which means I can get more Jeep toys. That's really where I was at then. And so it's trying to be, my dad taught me it's better to be smart with your money than to be done with your debt.
Absolutely.
And so, we do everything we can to stay out of debt. If we stay within our budgeted amount, I know that at the end of every month, we will pay off our credit card every month. And now Dave Ramsey will tell you, don't do credit cards, right? There's some philosophy behind that. Here's why. Most of the people that do Dave Ramsey typically have 2, 3, 4 credit cards, and a few of those are maxed. And so they've got to figure out how to get out of that. And so the best way to get out of that is not use them. Get rid of them until you can learn to manage them and they don't manage you. And
He
so,
speaks to the masses,
yes,
not individuals.
not the individual. And so I tell people, if you can manage how to use a credit card and use one that gets you points or some kind of payback. We use our Costco card. Last year we made like $2,000 from Costco just by using the card, and we get the kickback. And we paid off every month, so I didn't pay Costco anything for $2,000. That's like free money. You know what I use that? Golf. Golf. No, we split that, and that's the bonus stuff. I mean, that's just, I'm just trying to be a little bit wiser with what we got. Now, the toughest thing is what typically happens, and I think one of the handouts I gave you a few weeks ago talks a lot about this. What usually happens is one person is a spender, one person is a saver. And in most relationships, one person is a spender, and you don't have to elbow each other. Each of you know who you are, right? One person's a spender, one person's a saver. And I love that balance. If you communicate. If you don't communicate about it, it's horrible for one of you. Really fun for the other. Because the one who's the big spender, if the saver isn't saying anything, and the big spender is spending, they're going to spend before they save. And sometimes that big saver, if they only saved, you'd never have any fun. You may have a great retirement fund, which if you're doing the other plan where you're putting 15% back, you're going to anyhow, right? Because that works out for longevity. But if you're always saving and you're not spending something, you're not having any fun. But if you're always spending and you're not saving, you're in a lot of debt, and it's managing you really quick. So you've got to communicate between the two of you. You got to know, am I the spender or the saver? And what I find, especially in marriage counseling with folks, is I could probably count on one hand over my 20-some years of being a marriage family therapist and working with a lot of families, a lot of couples. I could count on one hand how many of them actually have a written out, set down, talked about budget. Because we just kind of work it and operate on the fly. We're kind of like, I think I know where my money's going. I think we have enough in savings. I think this is how much we should have. I think we're spending enough, or not. We're not spending too much in different areas. But I think the ones that have sat down and done budgets, they live a lot less stressful. They have a lot more communication. In fact, I think the ones that don't come see me are the ones that probably have budgets set up, because they don't need me, because they've got it figured out, right? They don't have the stress, because what happens when you're stressing your finances, you quit communicating. When you quit communicating, you begin to assume what the other one's thinking, what the other one's saying, what the other one's feeling. And then when you begin assuming that, all havoc breaks loose, right? That's what typically happens. And so it's just a downward spiral of bad, all because you didn't communicate about the finances from the beginning. So I have a small handout for you. Now this is what I hand out in pre-marriage counseling to every couple. Yeah, Wendy, you're all over here. You're like, here, let me help you. You were just adjusting, weren't you? This is an easy form for anybody dealing with finances in their
One
marriage.
per couple or one per person?
Whatever you want to do. If there's enough for one per person, please do. I think I printed out 18 of them, so. And by the way, being successful with finances has nothing to do with your bottom line of income. I know people who are nearly millionaires that live in deep debt. And what's funny to me is, how many times have you heard of, so-and-so who's made millions in their life filing for bankruptcy? It's not because they're out of money, it's because they didn't manage the money they got. I've also known people who hardly make very much money at all and have everything they need and are very happy and are able to manage because they spend within their means. The one thing that we are terrible about in the United States is figuring out what our means are and living within them. We think we know what our means are. We think we know how much we have. But if we don't put it down on paper, we don't really know where our money's going. And so this is kind of an easy way, and you see I did the pastoral thing, but I put at the very top. tithe and offering first thing on your expenses, because that really ought to be. If you want God's blessing in your life, it always cracks me up. Sorry, it always cracks me up that people want all of God's blessings without doing any of God's obedience and responsibilities. Don't expect God to bless your finances if He doesn't own your finances. If you're not honoring Him with your finances, if you're not following Him with what He says about your finances, don't expect it. If you follow Him with your finances, you'll never be worried. Trust me on that. Trust me on that. Lois and I were living for quite a long time on one income, and I was a youth pastor. You know what that means? We had no money. She was a stay-at-home mom, and we had everything we needed. In fact, we were 6 payments from paying off a house that we had lived in for 5 years, or 6 years. And it had nothing to do with the income amount. It all had to do with living within our means and knowing how to be smart with what we had. We were driving 2 vehicles without payments. At that time, we thought that was the best thing for us, is to drive cars we didn't have to have payments on. It means our insurance is cheaper. And let me give you a hint on how to really save a big amount of money every year. How many of you have been with the same insurance company for more than 2 years? How many for more than 3? 5. Oh, you're an insurance person. I can't see this in front of you. You're going to kill me, aren't you? I didn't think about that. Oh.
I can counteract what you're gonna say, but go ahead.
Okay, please. I shop my insurance every 3 years just to make sure I got the best rate for what I need for my insurance. Help me, Gina.
So when you do that, yeah, you can do that. But when you do that and you're with a different company every 2 years, and if you have multiple claims, you'll be canceled
Yes,
very shortly.
very shortly. Yes,
If
that's
you
the key.
don't-
You can't go driving recklessly.
If you don't have the longevity
Yeah,
of
except
that
for
company.
my dad, and here's where I got this from my dad. He managed this corporate farm. We had all of our farm equipment, all of our land, all of our crop insurance through one company, and he also had our personal insurance through that same company. He had pulled out, the sun was setting on the road, and he had pulled out a little bit, and a car was coming, and he didn't see them, and he stopped real quick, and he just creased the whole side of their car with his front fender. It was a 69 Thunderbird, big tank that he had, and so it had that big steel bumper, and when it went across that bumper, it just put a crease all the way down from the front to the back of his car. So they turned in the insurance on it, and obviously, it covered it. But then the insurance guy, no offense to you, okay?
I get it.
Help me, okay? He called my dad and said, now, he hadn't had a ticket, hadn't had another accident in at least 10 years. And the guy said, we're gonna have to drop your insurance because you have a high propensity from our formula. We think you're gonna have another accident sometime soon. And I'm like, really? How do you, and you guys have the algorithms. I have not, I don't know. And so my dad's like, oh, okay. So I'm not gonna have your insurance anymore. He goes, no, you're gonna have to get different insurance because we think you're gonna have another accident. The law or whatever they figure, whatever says you might have another accident sometime soon. So you're a bigger liability than what we've had. Dad goes, okay. So what about the farm and the crop insurance and the machinery insurance and all that stuff that she goes, no, we can keep that. He goes, no, you can't. You get one.
State Farm.
What's that?
I'm just kidding.
No, it was State Farm.
I know them well.
Yeah, that's exactly, that's
I'm
the,
an independent, so I have all kinds of companies.
yeah, right, and that's where I always go. I always go to an independent, and my dad taught me, because he was loyal to them for like 25 years, and then he had 2 accidents in 25 years, one within 5 years, and one at the very end. And that's it. And they said, we think you're gonna have another accident, so we're gonna drop you. And so he's like, he was loyal to them for 25 years, and they were loyal to him as long as he didn't use them.
Yep, that's the way State Farm works.
Yeah, and my father-in-law's had the same story, and I've heard other people the same story from them. You know, and so yeah, and so my dad taught me, don't be loyal to the insurance company. Be loyal to your money. Shop your insurance every 3 years. Go to the independent and say, here's the coverage I have. What can you get me? And that's the best thing to do because they will find you the best out there. They won't find you just what their package is. They'll find you what's the best out there. And so we end up saving a ton of money just by doing that every 3 years. So I need to give you a call, Gina. It's time for me to renew my insurance. I haven't done it actually it's been since COVID. I'm way overdue.
And as an independent, we do that for our customers.
Yes, and that's the other thing I love. Yeah, I've had that call from an insurance agent. Hey, you've been with this company, we want you to move to this company, and here's why. It's gonna be cheaper for you, same coverage. Okay, I'm great, thank you. You just earned my, I'm loyal to that all day long. All day long. There's no problem with that with me. So I shop my insurance. The other thing that I do, and I've been blessed by this, and Paul, you might have some great insight on this. When we bought our home, it came with a home warranty. And that home warranty is renewable every year. I have a $100 charge every time when anything breaks down. And my home warranty costs me about $550 a year, maybe $600 a year. And so every time that I have anything go wrong, we had dishwasher go out, we had a microwave oven unit. It's one thing. The microwave went out. They replaced the whole thing. It cost me $100. I paid $500 for the insurance for that year, and so that unit was $2,700. My washer and dryer went out. They bought the whole thing, brought me brand new ones, or they come fix it. We had an air conditioner unit go out. Man, we were in the house 3 years, and they replaced the whole thing. About $10,000 worth of stuff. I paid $150. And I'm paying $500. I figured just from the first one, I've paid for 10 years worth. And so I figure I'm still on the good side of the game, so I'm staying there as far as I can. And I woke up this morning and our air conditioner wasn't running. So guess what I'm going to do tomorrow? Putting in an order for them to send somebody out to take care of it. It's going to cost me $100. And so I'm an advocate for that. It's Old Republic home insurance or home warranty. There's bunches of them out there. There are bunches. Some of them are really good. Some of them are not as good. Do your research before you think about it. But I think it's just an easy way for us to budget for that. Then we don't have to worry about, oh, if that air conditioner's out, I've got to figure out where I'm going to come up with $5,000 to replace the whole thing. It's a lot easier to come up with $100. And it's even easier to do the $5,000 if I've saved 15% or 10% back or 5% back into an emergency fund that's going to build up over time that will pay for these kind of things from the beginning. Also, you notice up here I put savings as the third line. Before you pay anybody else, pay yourself. Pay yourself.
That's a hard lesson to learn.
It is, isn't it? Only because my dad asked me when I started working at our Nazarene headquarters. Was my first, for lack of a better term, real job. I'd been a social worker. I knew that wasn't going to be a long job, so I didn't do retirement plan there because I knew I wouldn't stay there long enough to be vested. So investing there would not be a good investment. And then I'm doing part-time jobs through seminary, through grad school, different stuff. And so when I started working at our Nazarene headquarters, I was on a salary. My dad said, you need to take, and he gave me an amount, put that in your retirement. And from that point on, we've stayed at that level, and every time our increases happened, that increased by that same percentage. And so since 1996, I've put into every time into a retirement. Lois at her job, same thing. Her company matches. My company does not match. Well, you gotta help me out here, brother. My company doesn't match, so I'm responsible for every bit that goes into my retirement. That's called an independent contractor, right? Your company doesn't match you, do they? No. That's what happens, right? Independent contractor, you're responsible for your own retirement, all that stuff. And so Lois's company matches up to a certain point. They'll match like 7% or 6%, something like 8%. It changes, it fluctuates with the market kind of thing sometimes. And so we make sure to always do at least that amount. At least, because otherwise I'm missing out on free money. And so I'm always trying to put in more than what they will match. And so that just helps increase that. And over time, that really begins to multiply. And so my goal is by the time I'm 65 and you guys are ready to kick me out of here and put me in pasture, I'm going to be able to at least golf once in a while. All right, that's my goal. And so then you have retirement, and then the next one is investments. In the Nazarene world, as a pastor, we have a retirement fund, and generations prior to me, thankfully Winston was not this way, he was wise. A lot in his generation as pastors, they were pastoring relying on whatever that pension fund was. In the Nazarene world, in the Nazarene church, if you're an elder, you're a pastor, for every year that you're ordained and actively in a ministry position, you get $50 for every year per month when you retire. So that means that's next to nothing. Okay, I'm buying crackers and cheese with that. I'm not even able to golf on that. And so, but there were a bunch that they never put into their own retirement, or they didn't do investments. And so if you don't, you won't.
Like Swiss cheese, cause you're gonna get a lot of holes.
You're gonna get a whole lot of holes on that money. That's exactly right. I put on here property taxes. And under insurance, I think homeowners insurance needs to be involved, but a lot of folks escrow those. There's arguments on both sides. You're an insurance agent. What do you tell folks?
I personally don't like escrows, but they don't give you a choice anymore.
Yeah, a lot of them don't. Well, you know why? Because if they don't escrow it, they'll never get it.
Right.
I mean, that happened back in 2008 when we had the crash of the market and everybody was foreclosed on. And from that point on, they pretty much said, if you're getting a loan, you're gonna have an escrow. And you've got to keep that escrow until you get down to only less than 80% on the house. Is that right? Something like that. Then you can come out of escrow. I don't like somebody else having my money. I do not. I would prefer not. But I also know I like the idea of I don't have to worry about it. And so you have to figure out in your own way which one you like better.
Which one's causing the most stress?
Yeah, I had a friend when I worked at headquarters. As a pastor, I'm responsible for all of my tax money. Gracefully, our church helps us with that. Not by paying it for us, but they pay it for us out of our package. So out of my package comes all of my income tax money. And so what I do is I have to parse out different expenses to get down my taxable salary down as low as possible, and then they pay my Social Security and my federal taxes out of that. When I worked at headquarters, they didn't do that. They just said, we're going to give you a check every quarter based on what we've paid you. That would be the amount for your federal and Social Security taxes and all that stuff, local taxes, and then you go pay them. Worked with a guy who thought, oh, I get a quarterly bonus. And he thought that for a whole year until he got his tax bill and realized, what do I do now? If that's why I say you've got to be able to manage which one you like better. If you're able to budget and pay those as they need, if you're able to save up the $1,500 to $2,000, whatever your property tax amount is every year, and be able to say, I'm going to put this in an account and not touch it and let it grow. And we don't have any bankers in here, right? I've already offended you, and but I put as little as possible in a savings account. Yeah, they don't work for you. You get 0% basically. I mean, you're getting 0.01%. Think on that for a second. You know what they make on your money? A whole bunch. Put it in investments. You've got to be smart with investments. If you need, one of the best places that I've found is Edward Jones. Is a really good place to handle investments. That's what my dad's always used. That's what my aunt worked for. That's what my father-in-law uses. That's what I use. And I only use them because they did. I'm like, okay, they've got it figured out. I'm just going to go off their tailcoats and just kind of mooch off of them with that. There are others that are out there, plenty good ones. And they will help you to be able to balance how much should I have in easy liquid stuff. It means you can go in and go, hey, I need this money, and they can give it to you and you don't have to pay a whole lot of tax on it. Or you can have stuff in more aggressive long-term stuff. And so I'm at that stage where now my investments are becoming more and more conservative and less aggressive, because I want to make sure there's something there when I'm 65, as opposed to going, yeah, let's ride the market as hard as we can. And so you got to manage that a little bit. I tried to list just about everything. And the last thing I put on there was miscellaneous. Because there are things on here that I didn't get that you need to have on there. I didn't put on there how many times I run to Speedway and get a Coke.
Is that what gift giving would come under?
It could.
And
You could.
Christmas,
I think that's another one that I've missed in there. Yeah,
we
gift
spend
giving.
a lot.
Yeah.
We disagree on that a lot.
Yeah, and you probably so. And maybe that's an area where you guys can have that discussion of, okay, how much percentage of our income should we give to giving gifts? And where do we put that money so that we know where it is when we need to get a gift to give a gift, kind of thing. And so wherever we save our money, if we do it in a savings account, which I really don't recommend and I usually don't use a whole lot, I use that for money that's going to come in and go back out pretty quick, so then I don't have to mess with it. Like the insurance money we got from our car. It's in our savings account because tomorrow I'm going to go write a check on it, so I can move it over to the checking and get rid of it. And so I've earned owe 1% for a month on $10,000. You know what I really got? Nada. So when you really look at that, I might have got a penny, if a penny. That's it. And so I only use that for funds that are kind of in and out funds. That's really it. The rest go into a more equitable kind of investing kind of fund, into an Edward Jones account. And so, and I can still call him tomorrow and go, hey, we need to get, whatever, say $5,000 out. And you go, okay, come on in, we'll get you, you can have it. And that's okay, because it's in a easy access kind of fund. And so you need to work with a financial manager. There's nothing wrong with that. It's it's not almost, it is worth paying somebody to help you do better financially than losing financially in the game. Personally, that's just my own personal opinion. And I always use somebody like an Edward Jones that only wins when I win. That's huge. It's fiduciary, is that right? That's the right word, right? It's a fiduciary. That means that if I make a profit, okay, they should make a profit. But if I don't make a profit, I'm not paying them anything either. There are others where, regardless what you do, you've got to pay them, whether you lose or win. And so I use a fiduciary, so I always win. If I win, they win. If I don't win, they don't win. They don't get any extra money. So notice on here I did put allowance. That's okay, this is her money, this is my money. We go play what we want. We'll do with it what we want. How have you seen people win or lose in the financial budgeting in their marriage? Who do you follow? How do you do it? How did you learn to do what you do? Do you do anything? Do you have a system?
I had my budgeting skills tweaked by a former pastor, Eugene Figge.
Yeah.
He taught me a whole bunch, and it started out with, you never let your outgo exceed your income.
That's a huge, yeah. That's number one. That's supply and demand, right? You gotta make sure your supply's there, or you have no demand for it. You gotta make sure. Yeah, Carol.
When we were talking about what we done, I didn't have a class years ago. But our pastor at the time preached on first fruits and first giving. And since Juba was self-employed, we would, he'd get his money daily, and by the end of the week we would run out. And but anyway, we learned to do that first, put the tithe first, and
Makes a
world
huge
of
difference
in our whole life.
The one thing that I find more often than not in church is we talk a lot about tithe. We don't talk a lot about budgets. We kind of say, as long as you're giving to God, you can do whatever you want with your rest. Good luck. And I don't think that's responsible. I don't think that's a good response, especially when we know who is talking about it, who is helping people with it. I don't just tell people, hey, give me a glass of water and I'll jump in the deep end and good luck swimming. I mean, that's just not good people management. That's not good taking care of people. And so I think in the last 20 years, it's become more of a thing in churches to have, we've had the Dave Ramsey classes here. And whenever we have them, they're heavily attended.
And they're teaching it in colleges now.
Yes, most colleges have that as a freshman level class. Because if they learn it first, they'll have it mastered by the end. That'll help them. Because usually most kids come out of college with credit card debt like crazy and student loan debt like crazy. And that helps them to be able to not have that or manage that whatever they've got, without a doubt. Tell me if this is you guys.
We're Chet and Susanna Baines. As marriage experts, we specialize in home modifications, which will help you improve the feng shui of your marriage.
Because home is where the heart is, we update, construct, and remodel your nightmare and flip it into the marriage of your dreams. We are
the Marriage Fixer-Uppers.
So guys, tell me exactly what's been going on.
I feel like he shuts down and never wants to talk about how he's feeling.
Oh yeah. We're gonna tear down that wall. Really open it up in here.
Perfect. That's what I want.
She doesn't understand the pressures I have at work. It's a lot to bear. I have to do it on my own.
You definitely have a load-bearing issue, that's for sure. But don't worry.
Huh. Where's that stud?
Exactly. Where's the stud I married? The one that...
Here we go again. Talking about my myself. Go. You know how many wads I know? The reason why you're gonna have to get this light bulb. Get what I'm saying?
Are you saying I need a new light bulb?
What? No. Your marriage just needs a little spark.
Are you even an electrician?
No, it's just anecdotal marriage analogies. That's what counts.
What in the world is that? Those are the new his and her toilets. You see, marriage is about opening up and sharing everything together. We like to call it sharing our marriage bowels. Sometimes we don't have a lot of money left in the budget.
It starts to sound a little bit like our marriage. Am I right? No.
But with the leftover money, you have one of three options to choose. Number one, we have a beautiful walk-in closet for the master bedroom. Here we have a man cave with theater seating.
That one sounds good to me.
Just like you to think about yourself.
Guys, this is about talking, listening, making a decision together.
And number three, a brand new in-ground swimming pool.
Yeah.
That sounds like a nice compromise.
Why is Chet shirtless?
Oh, the pool company too. Just got my chest waxed.
Walk-in closet sounds great.
Are you guys ready to see the latest addition to your lovely home?
Yeah.
They are sure to bring this marriage back to good.
Ta-da! What is this? It's a dog. See, nothing brings a couple closer together than having a common purpose, like being able to take care of a dog. Gives you more responsibility when it comes to taking care of the kids.
The kids? Whose kids are these?
You can't be serious.
Oh, hey, don't worry. We're turning John's office into a guest suite, so when the in-laws come to move in, everything will be taken care of.
You got rid of my office?
Oh, come on, like you never did any work in there.
Not now, Brooke.
Mommy and Daddy are fighting again.
Oh, no!
You guys, you weren't ready for kids.
These aren't our kids.
Well, it looks like our work is done here. Good job, honey.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential there.
It's funny to me how many times, and especially in our budgeting world, we think we know what we're doing. And sometimes we hire people to help us that aren't necessarily qualified to do what it is we need to do, when sometimes the answers are really right in front of us. Let's just be honest. These papers, not rocket science. Not rocket science at all. My dad with an 8th grade education taught me this. Not my college class. I even had an accounting class, quite a few my first year and a half of college. And we talked about accounting principles. We talked about how to do in and out accounting, ledger sheets, all that kind of stuff, how to balance sheets and all that kind of fun stuff. We never talked about how to budget, never talked about personal finance. And I think there's a lot of really good personal finance material. If you have an internet connection, you can almost just Google personal finances, managing personal finances, and there are just oodles amounts of how to manage your finances. And if you sit down together, because this is what Lois and I do whenever we have a big purchase to do. If we didn't get the insurance money from the car, or it wasn't what we needed, or we needed to figure out how much can we really spend on a car, we'd sit down and do this to figure out what can we really spend on a car, and allow that to dictate when we go to the car lot what we're looking for. Not the, I'd really kind of like to drive a Mercedes, so I think we'll just get one. Had a buddy in college who had a 67 Mustang his dad gave him. You know what happens when the dad gives a kid a 67 Mustang? Stupidity. He liked this girl really, really bad. She didn't want anything to do with him. And so he asked her out. She said, I will never go out with you till you drive a BMW. Because she figured he'll never drive a BMW. He took his 67 Mustang and traded it in on a really bad used BMW that caught fire a month and a half later, and she never did go out with him anyhow. Sometimes we got a
clue when she told him that. I would have said,
I said, I don't need you. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, that was really I'm not ever going to date you kind of comment anyhow. But sometimes we let our ego outdrive our income. And we can't do that in our finances and expect it to work. So My goal for you guys is to take these and maybe sit down together calmly as best as possible. I want to get that caveat. And put down what's really real. You'll be amazed that by the end, it'll be tense at the beginning because this is awkward. If you've never done this before, it's awkward, it's goofy. You think, do I have to tell them about really all that? Or can I just say, some of that? Or how to be completely, purely honest. Because if you don't, you'll never get to the happy at the end. And by the end of this, you'll be going, oh, this is manageable. This is doable. We're actually better shape than I thought we were. Or at least because now you know there's no guessing. Because when there's guessing, we always guess the worst, not the best. Right? When your mind races, when somebody tells you a situation and you don't know all the info, your mind races to the worst possible. When the doctor says, hey, I need to talk to you, your mind races to the worst, right? And sometimes it's not necessarily. Until you know. You don't know. You never know what you know until you know. So, my hope, my prayer for you this next week is that you would just sit down over a cup of coffee or tea or whatever and just go, let's do our budget. And let's figure this out. And by the way, if you don't know where some of these lines are, get into your bank account or get into your Visa statement or whatever you need to do and figure them out. They're all there. They're categorized typically. You can make them into categories and then you can follow it and let it flow very easily from then on. Because I believe God wants the very best for your finances because he wants the very best for your marriage and your relationship. And it starting with a budget. All right? Don't have a whole lot of handouts tonight because that's all you need. It's really that simple. It's really that simple. Let me pray for us. Father, we love you. And we thank you that you bless us so well. Sometimes we don't feel like we're blessed. Sometimes we feel like, there's not enough. Sometimes we are overwhelmed with your blessing. Father, you love us so much. You bless us so much. And I believe you bless us so that we can bless others, and we can bless others when we finally have a handle on our finances. And I pray for each of these couples that, Father, you would just help them over this next week to sit down and get a really good look at their finances. And that by the end of it, Father, they would all know exactly where they're at and be able to go, okay, we can do this. It's okay. And Father, I just pray that you would just bless them as they do this. Thank you for the blessings that you give. And thank you that, Father, you continue to bless us as we worship you with our giving. We trust you. Thank you for trusting us. In your Son's name, amen, with an exclamation mark. Again, I'll let you know about next week. We'll see what we can do. Maybe I should just have Tony and Linda come and talk about sex. Since I won't be here, that's what we're going to talk about. So I'll just tell them that. Hey, by the way, I'm going to be out there. Since they didn't come this week, they told me they had their daughters in town. So I'll tell them, hey, I can't be there next week. Guess what you get to talk about? The last topic is, So Tony will love that. Linda probably not so much, but that's okay. I just want you to know I've enjoyed doing this and having this class, and I've enjoyed you guys being in here and us being able to just kind of do this and talk about it and everything, all the different topics that we have. I hope it's been as a bigger blessing to you than what it has been to me. I've really enjoyed it. So
where are you next week?
I've got
If you'd been here, you would have.
Yeah, if you'd have been here, man.
I've been with the children.
Oh, blaming the kids. See, it goes back to that thing, when we have to accept our responsibility, not project it. So anyhow, no, I'll be at a viewing for the officer, for the deputy that was killed, and so I have to oversee all that. They don't have a pastor, so I am the pastor.
Good for you.
So,
Good place to be.
and again, I covet your prayers over this next week. It's going to be it's a difficult time. And it's going to be even a more difficult time over the next week, and then it's going to be even more difficult after that for them and for all of them. So it's a process. It's not an overnight thing. The beginning started in one moment. The ending may never end. We don't know where that ends when. So thanks for being here. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I guess we're dismissed unless you have anything else. Someday I'll actually get the sound.
This has changed.
You go, girl.
Oh, they look
identical, don't they?
I know.
You got me, Gene.
Did you enjoy it?
Oh, we had a great time.
Oh, is it?
Paul's gonna be calling you. Paul's gonna have to get with you.
I got several comments.
Guess who I'm with?
Guess who you shouldn't be with?
Stay Farm.
Don't put a blue door in a red car. I've had them trying to do that.
Really?